But again, it's that literacy and empowerment so they can actually protect themselves
That's
against
huge.
that.
I mean, clearly, the avenues have to be well laid out and communicated to the kids, and I think the parents as well.
And we actually just need more laws that address things like online harassment, things that haven't been a problem up until now.
That's right.
We just don't have anything, or don't have any laws in place to deal with.
It's starting at the home, though. A lot of the hate, I think, ignorance is still within the walls of the home. We can get into public institutions like schools. We've got wonderful camps like Camp Firefly that can aid in that regard as well. How do we get the message of empathy into the home? It's a tough one.
The media is doing a good job with like representation in the media, in Glee as an example. I guess there's those things, those conversations happening on that platform, and kind of normalizing those representations and not stereotyping and enforcing those stereotypes. But there's it's about giving access to parents. Like, how can they have these conversations? And some schools will say we're going to touch on sex ed and connect with Calgary Sexual Health and do a talking to your kids about sexuality workshop or something like that. But the thing is you can't force parents to come into those conversations.
Just got to have them listen.
Yeah.
Right? Just have them listen, if only a little bit. Kind of a broad question. I'm looking for your honest opinion. Mm-hmm. Is Calgary an LGBTQ friendly city, or are we simply a tolerant city? Or does it, is it relative to what demographic you ask?
I wouldn't necessarily say demographic, but it does depend on individuals that you ask, because there's a bit of a divisiveness between people who are supportive, people who are kind of impartial, and people who really strongly dislike the LGBT community in Calgary, as attested to by, as we were discussing earlier, the pride flag that our city is flying during the Olympics. Mm-hmm. There was a huge amount of backlash from just regular Calgary residents against even flying a flag.
I know what you're talking about. I read some of the online comments. I read the story online, a local publication. It was horrific, frankly. Embarrassing is another word that comes to mind. Mind you, that is one element of the population in general, Nick.
I think it depends what circles you walk in, and I think the important piece, even if you walk in a circle where it isn't safe to be LGBT, there is a really strong community growing and developing still in Calgary in the last 10 years. So there are resources and supports for young people and adults to go to and connect with. And I think if people look, they'll find a community where they can feel safe and comfortable in certain neighborhoods and communities, and there's lots of supports. And I think that's the key piece, And
it's tough though too. I mean, you can only really relate to who you spend your time with, what you observe. I play hockey, which is it can be considered an aggressive macho game, and I'll tell you right now that everybody in that room is mellow, very accepting bunch. So
Brian Burke's doing some good work with that, with the You Can Play project,
of course, son.
And that's creating social change in that domain, which stereotypically is not safe for LGBT people. But that work is happening. There's an advocate, and I think the conversation is happening that now football as well too.
I want to touch on that in just a moment here. We're going to jump to a quick break and check on the Rad Pack again, folks. Stay with us.
I hope we are raising our children in an environment that is much more smart and acknowledges that there is a vast continuum to human sexuality, and some people exist on this end and some people exist on this end. A lot of people do, and some people live in this place here, and that's fine. My only concern would be that because there's a huge political push to make sure that all people have equal rights, that not being straight, there's a cachet about it, and people might kind of experiment just because it's cachet. That's my only concern.
Let's you touch on what Julie had just commented on.
I think that implying that somebody is questioning their gender or sexuality as a matter of popularity or trendiness is problematic, in the sense that sexuality and gender are both things that can be very fluid. There is no gender binary, and as she said, there is a spectrum. Mm-hmm. And whether or not somebody's motivations for experimenting or for questioning, their motivations don't really matter. What matters are their resources, like the information available to them, what conclusions they come to, how comfortable they are with themselves. It doesn't matter if they're doing it because they're like, oh, it's so cool, which is never actually going to be a danger. But because like the fact that they're willing to question it in the first place maybe indicates that they need to.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think that's fair. Now, recently we've seen a whole lot of Hollywood personalities, really public Hollywood personalities, have gender reassignment surgery. I think of a few big-name directors, there's Jazz Bono, for example. We've seen actors, of course, and recently, even a college football star, which is pretty huge amongst the sports world. How inspiring is it for our youth to see people in these positions come out like that? Does it have the same traction that an outsider like myself would think that it would?
Visibility is huge.
It's so important, very important, and there needs to be healthy representation in the media so that they can see positive role models. People who are successful athletes, professors, police officers, whoever, hockey players, so they can not feel that they're going to be restricted by their identity.
It's the role model thing, clearly.
Well, seeing people that identify as like genderqueer, or people who are trans, or gay, or anything in the media, like it has the same effect as being a person of color and seeing somebody else who is a person of color on television. Like, if you never see something that you identify with in public or in the public eye, you're going to start associating that as something that isn't normal or something that isn't acceptable to the public. So when you see them represented on TV and it's just a matter of course.
No, that's right. I would argue that it's just as important, well, perhaps more so important, to the youth in today struggling with issues, as it is for educating the general public.
It gives you an idea that you're not the only one like that out there, or that it's not something that you can't talk about.
So how do we promote more people taking the stand? I guess we need more, the more we speak, the bigger the wave gets.
Creating safety for them to come out.
Yeah.
The response to that football player wasn't all
No, unfortunately, even in Canada, that's right.
And if you can't come out and feel safe and comfortable, who's going to want to come out? That's where the allies have play a big part, is setting that precedent and saying that you can come out and you can feel safe and comfortable. And props to, I can't even think of the guy's name, but that newscaster from Texas that went around Facebook. He advocated it for the Sam Neils or whatever his name was, and
that's huge, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because when you have people that aren't part of the community just expressing their acceptance and leaning on their friends through social media and whatnot, this is how I feel. How do you feel about it? I mean, that's how you start a movement. That to me is how you use social media.
I think it'd be really cool to see allies start coming out of the closet.
I love the coming out of the closet movement. It started online. People coming out on like social media as supportive of gay rights, and people even just supporting gay rights would lose friends. They would be ostracized from their family just for having a certain belief for other people's life choices. And even there's courage in just coming out in support of other people. So if we maybe play up how it's really awesome and courageous to support human rights, which should be implied, but apparently isn't, then maybe we could grab a bit more support from the community.
Do we think that as every generation passes, you mentioned Glee, I mean, there's no question that there's a lot of gay TV characters, movies as well, that we see, a lot nowadays, which I think is great. A lot of people are getting the message. Does it translate each generation where things, regardless of what's going on in the home, things maybe do open up? So I hate to go back to it'll get better with time, but I mean, the whole general spectrum, is it kind of looking that way, that things will get better with time if we can keep progressing the way we are? Or is that a bit of a pipe dream?
Socially, you can see how far we've come even in the last 30 years from the original AIDS epidemic in America to today. There's been huge strides made.
Good example.
People couldn't be visibly gay in public at all for fear of being beaten in the street.
That's right.
The LGBT rights movement is the next human rights movement.
Yeah.
We still have racism and sexism is still alive and well, but homophobia is the next conversation piece, and the wave is coming, and schools are embracing it, communities are embracing it, and it's
that's why we'll keep the conversation going.
And just sexism and homophobia are closely tied together too. They're kind of contingent on each other. So the closer we get to gender equality, the more likely we are to have a non-homophobic society.
Just got to keep talking about it.
And
Keep
props
putting it in
to
their
you
faces.
for having the conversation.
Yeah.
Guys, thanks a lot for being part of the conversation. Thanks so much for being here tonight. Folks, that's all the time we have. We think it was an informed discussion, and of course you can keep the conversation going on Facebook as well as Twitter. If there's a topic you'd like us to get at, by all means, let us know. Drop us a line. Until then, take care.